What does an executive director's day look like?
So the executive director is really just the corporate title, but just in terms of my role specifically, so for me, a significant amount of my time is just on people management because I've got quite a big team across a number of locations. So, you know, dealing with resource management issues, coaching, signing things off. You know, I tend to have to approve different things, so I guess I used the example before about crisis management. So where we're introducing particular policies that are going to, you know, support or benefit our employees, I'd likely be involved in, you know, the final reviews and the sign off.
Do you sign off things like pension changes or changes?
No, I wouldn't do that.
Oh, okay.
So pension changes and sign off will be handled by an HR director in pensions.
Right.
Yeah, so I cover specifically HR advisory, which is the function that partners with our senior leaders on their people strategy, but there will be an HR director in pensions and compensation and recruitment and all the other areas because we're obviously quite a big company.
Awesome. What is one of the common myths about your profession, or a myth or something that you want to debunk about HR people, maybe?
I think you started off by saying, right, that HR is generally not that sexy. You know, people tend to see it as quite, I guess, boring or, you know, but I think my response to that is just do your research on the industry because there are some really interesting things, you know, working, particularly in financial services. I know some HR people who support oil and gas, which is super fascinating, especially if you're having to deal with employees in, you know, the Middle East and different parts of the world.
And on
oil rigs. Yeah, and oil rigs. I know one HR person who had to go and visit from time to time.
Way.
Yeah.
So that means you have to go on a helicopter, right?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
See, get to be a HR professional, guys, in oil and gas, obviously. What would you say to people who doubt themselves because of their race or their colour?
I think that, look, you've just got to understand what your strengths are, first of all. So, you know, we've all got strengths. Like, every single person has something that they're really good at, and trying to understand exactly what that is and using it to your advantage is really key. And I think it's also helpful when it comes to things like building your personal brand within the workplace. You've got to think about, okay, what is my unique selling point and how can it add value? How can I use that to add value within the organisation?
Mm-hmm. What does success mean to you and why?
Being happy. I know it's very short, but genuinely, like, being happy, just being happy, being content. You know, for me, I've got a family, a husband and 3 young children, and being able to make my kids happy is absolutely number one for me at the moment, just in terms of success.
Cool. What have you read or listened to recently that inspired you?
Becoming Michelle.
Cool.
Yeah, really brilliant book. I'd highly recommend it, just particularly if you're in a leadership position, because she really talks about, you get to see another side to Michelle, right? And, you know, her journey of self-discovery, you know, especially when, you know, the former president, Barack Obama, obviously stepped down, and, you know, the journey for her to kind of find herself and you know, showcase all of the brilliant qualities of her. I mean, she's exceptional, so talented, a great leader, and I think that's been quite helpful for me as I've taken on, you know, a broader leadership position.
Excellent. Okay, so who are 3 people who have been the most influential to you?
Okay, my mum, an obvious one. I would say my grandfather, actually. Like, my mum, and I spoke about her very briefly before, but just because, you know, incredibly hardworking, very determined, and I think her ability to be able to push myself and my siblings for us to be able to, I guess, in some ways, be part of that very small percentage who have been able to make quite great achievements is brilliant. You know, she, unlike other people, if you think about ourselves today, right, if you think about what we're able to provide our kids, our parents had nowhere near that.
Yeah.
So it is, for us to be in the positions that we're in today, truly, like, kudos to them. But the other person is my grandfather. Like, he's no longer with us. He was one of, I think, 13 kids, or maybe 10. He was the youngest, from a village, very, very poor. And he was able to achieve so much success before he passed away. He became the Deputy Commissioner of the Police in Ghana. He was a member of Parliament. Just an incredible career. I could talk about him for hours. But just to see his drive and determination coming from the village, literally the youngest child, and being able to, he joined the police at quite a young age. He didn't go to university or anything like that. But apparently he was very smart, so progressed very quickly and was able to make, huge achievements in his life. Aha,
there you go. Everyone we've been talking, I'm like, so where does this thing come from?
Where does the drive come from?
How does it, okay, it makes so much sense now. So, but then I guess it's stuff that the family always talk about. It wasn't like you heard it one time and that was it.
No.
His name will come up and then obviously as people remember, especially when parents get older, they start reading off stories.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And look, when I went to Ghana, I spent time with him. So I would say, okay, so in answer to your question, where does this drive or ambition come from? Actually, my time in Ghana. Those 5 years that I was in Ghana.
What happened in Ghana?
I just think seeing black success. That was it, honestly. It was like you'd meet kids and their parents who were like, CEOs of companies or like running big businesses. And this was like 30 years ago. And Ghana has developed so much. So just to think about what it was like back then, and seeing that success was just truly inspiring. And it was for my mum, and partly actually, so when we came back, so obviously I mentioned before that because dealing with grief with my grandma, suddenly passing away, for her, she came back and she studied to become a nurse at the age of 40 because she was like, I cannot go back to living in a council estate. I need to better my life for myself and my kids. And and that's when she and my dad bought a house. It was still in the area, it was literally across the road from the council estate. But at least she bought something. They bought something, which is great.
And Colindale now, prime real estate.
Exactly, great, right? So I think the experience in Ghana was really where I got my drive and determination.
So then, even hearing what you're saying now, especially for where we are now, thinking about my children and exposing them to what blackness is and what that experience is, I need to get them on a plane essentially so they can see.
Absolutely. My kids, we went to Ghana in December, my kids absolutely loved it, to the point in which they were like, we're not coming back home. We're going to Grandma's Palace in Ghana. Because it's standard in Accra, the houses are all huge. And just for them, seeing that, they were like, oh my goodness, is this Africa? It's just insane. So I do think that to be able to showcase that, and also just the richness and the beauty of our culture, I think is really important. So those 5 years were absolutely life-changing because, as I mentioned before, I wasn't that academic, but I did have drive because of what I saw and having friends, back home who, going to, I guess, the equivalent of a private school, arguably, because it was fee-paying, everybody was ambitious, everyone wanted to get the top grades. So there was that kind of healthy competition, which I think had an influence on overall drive and ambition. So when I came back to the UK, although I knew I didn't have, I didn't have any experience with the curriculum, so I clearly was lacking, I still had that drive, which I put in all my focus on, as I started to work.
Excellent.
Forward